Jovino Santos Neto.
It's my big pleasure to be here. So really, thank you for having me. Thanks to everybody here at Berklee. This is a great place to learn music and, hey, to the band. So the reason why I'm here is, first of all, it's always a question when I walk into a room and I don't know the people who are there. Some of you might already be approaching this whole subject from a place where you already know quite a bit. Some of you, dangerously, might be in a place where you think you know quite a bit, which is always a dangerous thing. And some of you might be just approaching, hey, I don't know anything about this. So, for the purpose of evening out the whole thing, I would assume that nobody knows anything, including me. So it's a good place to start. I think the empty cup is always a good place where you can pour some water in. So I really try to take, first of all, some things, start from the basic points. The basic point number one is that you are here because you probably like Brazilian music in some way. And I think it's a fairly safe assumption to make. And you've heard it, maybe you've danced to it, maybe you've played it, maybe you've heard people playing it, maybe you've heard Brazilians playing this music, maybe you've heard American jazz musicians playing this music. So in all of these different situations, you might have gotten things from very different perspectives. For instance, a lot of accomplished jazz players, if jazz has been your language for a long time, and you have played, played all the jazz standards, and you have done, your homework as far as playing bebop tunes and the blues and all that, and rhythm changes, it could be that you already have some basic rhythmic accents in your playing, which could help you in a lot of variety of situations, but in some other situations it might actually stand in the way. And that's what I said about when you think you know something versus when you don't know something. And I always, every time I learn something new, regardless of, I don't know anything about this music. I have some assumptions and I'll try to work from that place, but basically I would try not to play from my assumptions, because that is one of the best ways to understand. And I'll explain a little better about what it is that I mean. For instance, just counting into a tune. Sometimes counting into a tune, if you come from a very strong jazz tradition, used to this as a way to count. And many times I've been in jam sessions, people say, okay, let's play The Girl from Ipanema. And they go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, which, it's okay. It's all right. That song can be done as a swing tune. But there's a very difference in the way how do you incorporate the basic grid? I call this the grid of a tune. The grid of a tune is the underlying substructure of pulse. So this is where we call the tactus, or the place where you tap your feet. If you understand that as being the place of accent, or the place where the music touches the ground, we call this the downbeats. So if we count, interesting to know that a lot of people write sambas in 2, a lot of people write sambas in 4, a lot of people write sambas in cut time, which is 2-2. So there's a lot of differences in the way. So I'll speak a little bit to that. Talking with the guys who play samba, and I'm not going to go too deeply today into the history of it, because that's another workshop. I teach a 15-week course in Brazilian music history, and I feel that I'm cheating the subject and the students when I try to condense Brazilian music into like 10 minutes. It's way too deep for that. But I know there's a lot of places you can actually study that. If you go to my website, and I'll give you the link later, there's a lot of links to other places where you can learn about that. But if you just basically sit down with people who are playing samba, and you notice, you look at their feet. That's one first thing I do when I'm playing with musicians that I don't really understand what it is they're talking about. I look at their feet and see what their feet are doing. And you will see people playing like, a very simple samba tune that maybe has like, just going to play like C major and G7. That's like, a lot of the old traditional tunes, that's what they do. They got... Syncopated. This music has a lot of syncopation, but the syncopation is not here. And that usually, if you talk about functions, when you talk about things like bass, the bass drum, they're basically representing what in the rhythm of samba is the function performed by the drum called the surdo. A surdo is S-U-R-D-O, is usually a large drum. It can be as large as, you know, some of the ones we call Maracatu, the earth shakers, are huge. That gives you a real deep sound. Those drums are not syncopated. And not only they're not syncopated, they accent on the place that's not the downbeat. So if I treat this as being 2 beats, as in 1, 2, 1, 2, and my syncopation will be. Yeah, that's the samba there. So 2 is big, 1 is small. In some groups, 1 is not even there. They just go to boom, boom. 1 is like muted, ghosted. All you get from 1 is the ghost. And this is very interesting to think of this because the emphasis on beats 2 and the non-syncopation of the left hand, as far as my experience goes of watching people play, this seems to be the very first thing that throws people off the groove. You have a lot of bass players that go or pianists that are trying to play. That kind of stuff is a groove killer. It's really a groove killer. It's the difference between a groove and a ditch. If you understand. Very close, but different. So these are the first things that I try to ask people to not do. So it turns out I do a lot of workshops and clinics where I work with pianists, and basically they ask me to like listen to their playing and do a little bit of critiquing. So the first thing I tell people is like, play less. You have to be more economical, especially on the bottom. And instead of a lot of notes in the wrong places, pick 1 note and put it on the. And the good place to be with the samba is on 2. If you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, or as in cut time, that would be 3, of course, because it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if you're thinking the way I think, it's like 1, 2, 1, 2. Whatever that is the place. So that is 1/2 of the story, which can be quite boring. I've had bass players say, but that's going to be my life from now on, just playing boom, 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 boom. That's boring. Of course it is boring. So I'm not talking about what a bass player plays or what the left hand does. I'm talking about what is the basic underlying structure of the groove. And the basic underlying structure of the groove doesn't have to be worn on the sleeve. You don't have to. That can be explicit, meaning on the outside. It can be implicit, meaning it's internalized and you're playing from that place. The other side of the samba groove is the opposite. It's very syncopated. And as far as the drums are related, that would be the tamborim. The tamborim is a drum about this big that you play with a stick or with a hand with a little, plastic thing. And it's very syncopated. And usually the tamborim you play by muting the skin with your finger, and basically you do this. There's Mark doing it. We're not doing, me and him, any one specific pattern. We're basically just dividing. We're like I like to compare this to like a car dealer. I don't play cars, but I like when those guys go. And they're distributing the cars very fast. And in a way, it's almost random, not totally random. There are some patterns which can be used as a starting point. A very good one that I like to use is one that has 3 groups of 2 notes, evenly separated, but playing with a syncopation. And that would be like this: 1, 2, 1, 2, like. You know what I mean? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. So the first one is on the downbeat. The second one is off by 16. And the third one, it's right before the next beat. It's like off. That's the third one. Usually the hardest one for people to pick up. So if you put them together, that's a good starting point. But it's, as with everything, it's a dynamic balance. What is a dynamic balance? It's something which is in balance when it's in motion. Good example is a bicycle. You look at a bicycle standing there and say, oh, nice bike. But you don't really get a sense. You don't learn to ride a bike by reading a book about the bike. You've got to get on the bike, fall a few times, hit the trees a few times. I remember when I learned to ride a bike. And at one point you get the balance, and it's a very good idea to work with music in comparison with Why? Because it's also a bilateral thing. You have two sides, two pedals. It's a lot easier. People say, when people try to teach you piano, say, oh, it's a lot easier. You learn first one hand and then the other hand. Imagine somebody learning to ride a bike and says, okay, first you bike with your left foot for 2 days, then you bike with your right foot for 2 days. It's not going to work. It's a dynamic balance. You need the 2 feet in conjunction with each other, and then you get, it takes a little while for the balance to work. So what I'm trying to show, and of course I'm accompanied here by 2 great masters who know this music very deeply, very inside. So we're going to take a little bit. First, let's take our 2 chords. Okay, D minor and G7. That's like, as we say, rice and beans. and we're just going to start from a very simple place, and then slowly start to build this assumption of the groove. And all I want you guys to do is to listen to that, tap your foot to that, and while tapping your foot, see if you can understand some of the syncopations that my right hand will be doing, that Mark's side stick will be doing. And Oscar, he's free. He's thinking of the bottom, but he's also can do, he's got a 6-string bass, got a lot of notes. He can do that. And the important thing, especially from a bass player point of view, is to be able to be thinking of the right groove, to be supporting the groove. We always, all 3 of us but all 3 of us are doing the bilateral thing. We all have one side which is non-syncopated and one side which is syncopated. So let's just have some fun with this. It's kind of like a medium tempo, so we don't freak people out. 1, 2, 1, skeleton. And I'm sure you probably have some questions about what we did, and I'll be happy to answer those. I'm going to make sure to leave time enough that we can talk, because your questions are really important. And I'm sure that if one person has a question, chances are that 3 or 4 have the same one too. But you probably noticed that there's a lot of ghost notes happening. Did you guys notice that? Did you see that I was doing a lot of notes that you barely heard, but you were kind of like, these little things which are basically like little snippets of notes, which are really important. And we all do this. You know, heard them on the bass, heard them on the drums, on the piano, you hear me doing that. That kind of thing. They're really important, because these things are the spacer between notes. These are the kind of things that tell me that I'm not thinking, what I'm really thinking is like, you can look at take a map of the world, you look at Hawaii, you think, oh, Hawaii, oh, look at the islands. Yeah, the islands. But if you imagine that the ocean is not there, then it's just a bunch of mountains, and the tip of the mountains are what sticks out of the ocean. It's the same thing, that we have all this huge mountain range of groove happening inside, and some of them stick out of the level of audibility, and some of them are buried. But that doesn't mean they're not there. So sometimes we just put just the surface a little bit, just barely under the surface. That's a ghost note. Meaning, what this really presupposes and what this really kind of like tells you is that as a player, you have to lock in with both the level of the pulse and the underlying subdivision. So in the case of the age-old question, what came first, was the chicken or the egg? Of course it was the egg. Because you cannot, with the egg you can totally get inside of that groove. If you shake a chicken like that, you don't get the and it's really important. I teach rhythm. I teach rhythm at Cornish College, and a really important thing that I do is that I play some music on a CD player or whatever, and then I have these little eggs and I throw them at people. And I immediately, what a challenge is to lock in with whatever pulse is happening in the music. Sometimes it's a 6/8, sometimes it's a swing thing, sometimes it's a straight. So the ability for anybody to lock in with the subdivision of whatever groove is happening is more important than your ability to play a lot of notes or to reach a 14th in your left hand, or all those things that some people think is really important to technically to be able to play a lot or to be very fast at playing scales. All this, of course, I'm not denying it's important. But from the rhythmic perspective, and most of all from the groove perspective, to be able to lock in with the subdivision of the music is really paramount. That is what it's all about. And in my clinic at IJE, I often use the word ginga. Ginga is a word that we use in many contexts. It basically refers to that dynamic balance that I just said that I just talked about a few minutes ago. And the dynamic balance is, you have that on a person's walk. You have that on anything that demands movement for its balance. So ginga is this. When we were playing the groove that you just heard us play, we were really in balance. Everything that I'm playing, every note that I play has a mirror connection with what Mark is doing, with what Oscar is doing. And by being able to do that, everything that comes out of that, whether we are playing just a straight beans and rice groove, or if we are starting to take this thing out, people say, well, I'm not a player. I'm not a very notey player. I like to play more spacey, and that's okay. You can play totally spacey with this. You can play very choppy, articulated. You can play totally velvety and lyrical and romantic. This is just how much water you put over the islands or not. The islands are still there. The mountain range is still there, meaning that's the groove. So I'll talk a little bit more about the samba. Perhaps we can take like a tune. Let's take like Wave by Jovino, which is a tune that hopefully some of you know. And we just play it and just kind of have a little fun with it. And afterwards, maybe maybe some of you have some questions. Okay, so let's do it like in B, okay? Like a... it's a beautiful composition by Tony Carlos Jobim, and in a way, it represents a lot of things because harmonically, it has a sophistication of chords with flat nines and sharp nines and flat 13s, all those things, demolished chords and, and stuff like this. But basically, in essence, this is the samba. A lot of people ask, well, what is a bossa nova? What is a samba? Well, rhythmically, from its core, it's basically the same thing. I'm not saying they are the same thing, but the inside rhythmic core is the same thing. Some of the differences have to do sometimes, of course, with the harmonic presentation of the tune, the harmonic complexity. Also, with the delivery style. Bossa nova, by definition, is a tune where a singer is singing almost whispering. Whereas samba, sometimes it can get pretty frantic and have 5,000 people singing in unison, which you would not do with the bossa nova tune. So it's that kind of difference. So it's not, but the inside, you can play both of them with like tack, 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 or tack, 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 tack. It's a matter of the speed, the dial, the tempo dial being turned up or down. And of course, regardless of the instrument you play, you have to know that fast sambas require lighter. They have to be streamlined. So if you play a very fast samba, you cannot do the same kind of weight placement of accent as if you play a very slow samba. You can do sec, boom. So if you everything kind of has to lift off the ground, and Mark is great to that. He plays that beautifully because if we have to play a fast samba, everything has to be very light. The 16th notes have to be very streamlined and very aerodynamic, so they can fly at different speeds. And I will be happy. I mean, I have to kind of I'm trying to be a good manager of time and make sure that everybody hears everything because I'm probably starting with what for most of you is the most familiar thing. Most of you have heard sambas, most of you in one way or another, and probably a few of you here, or many of you are actually very proficient at playing it. So they're saying, well, I'm preaching to the chorus. But it's more like it's important sometimes to address the basics here. So before I move on to anything else, I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions about things, how they're going so far. In any way? Questions? Doubts? Concerns? Ask for money? No, I don't.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
If you encounter someone who apparently has no sense of rhythm whatsoever, how do you get them to feel it?
A really good way of doing this is really get a person, first of all, I would just be an egg donor, just give an egg to them. And just sit there, and that's what, in a way, I approach that in many kinds of music, like say, for instance, Cuban music. I don't profess or consider myself an expert in African music, which is very complex. So if I'm in a place where a lot of people, way better than me, are playing this music, and I just want to approach it and I want to learn it, I usually, and people say, oh, come on, let's play something. I'm just going to go like this. Because in Cuban music, the clave gives you definitely an advantage point from which you can observe everything that's happening. The bass, the piano, the guajeos from the piano, the tumbao, the drum patterns, the melodies when they go in the downbeat, when they go in. So it's a great way to kind of hang on, like a barnacle in a ship, and just go for the trip while really being able to experience some of the things that are going on. And in samba music is the same. I mean, many times all you have to do in the samba music to be able to really kind of be able to lock in well is pick up a ganza or egg and just go. And you see what I'm doing when I'm singing here? I'm not singing. I'm doing. Or anywhere but on the downbeat. Because again, it's a dynamic balance. If you put other weights on one side of the scale gets tipped to the wrong way. So usually when I tell people to play the ganza or the egg, I tell them to use their elbows and accent on the cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4. If this would be quarter note, it would be the 8th note. Thank you. See, we have an egg donor here. This is great. You can do that. You can hang it with most sambas. A lot of sambas. An interesting thing is that a lot of the partido alto style of samba, which is improvised, small scale, usually not more than 6 or 7. And they're playing the hand drums, the hand tantan, the pandeiros, and usually one tambourine. you get a lot of people who sit around, like the observers, the people who are singing, not the first circle, but the second circle, third circle, the chorus singers, and a lot of them, over the samba. So they clap this kind of like 3-3-2 pattern, which is like, if this is your quarter note, that would be a dotted eighth note, a 16th tied to another 16th, and another 16th. Therefore, 3/16, 3/16, 2/16, 3-3-2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And usually starting on the 2, like as a pickup. This helps a lot, especially in the partido alto style. The other thing which I did not say, and I just remembered that, thank you for your question, because that actually brought me to something which I neglected to mention, and it's really very important, because we're really addressing this from the point of view of the accompanists. Playing the groove and being able to use our syncopations or our balance between the non-syncopated and the syncopated part to reach that dynamic balance. But of course, if you're like a horn player, singer, flute player, if you're a solo, if you're being a melodically prominent part in a music like this, you have to basically connect to the same points. Foot, subdivision. But then there's some rhythmic figures which by themselves, they already open the way for you to be able to enter that world. And one of the most important rhythmic figures which you will find everywhere is what we call the fork. The fork, my fork, it's lunchtime. Okay, the fork, it has 3 prongs like this, and it's usually a 16th, an 8th note, and a 16th. It looks like a fork, but basically when you play that, you play like this. That's a fork, right? If you play 2 together, or people say, no, what you're not playing is not really that, because if I'll be a classically trained player and I really want to follow, I said a 16th, an 8th, and a 16th, so that means that the 8th will be. But if you do that, another groove killer. So what I really mean with the 16th, an 8th, and a 16th is that the 8th has like a little dot on top of it. It's really another 16th with a little rest in there. But I could not call it a fork if it be written like this. For simplicity's sake, the fork is one of the most important figures because first of all, you can daisy chain them together. So if my melody, let's just do those 2 chords again. I'm going to focus a little bit on the melodic aspect here. Okay, D minor and G7, like 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Back where we were. Check it out. 4. All 4s. Session and you get to a player like a great jazz player. Let's play a samba, man. Yeah, sure. And you go. are the same. However, what it is that immediately you get that sense that you're mixing oil and water, and one of them is floating on top of the other, but they're not really gelling. So that is the kind of thing, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's a lot of great Brazilian players who play swing on purpose to really create that effect. The problem is when you're not aware of it. So having said that, I have to say that a lot of times it's a lot easier from say like an American player who was into like into funk music, for instance, or hip hop. It's easier for them sometimes to play samba than for a guy who's into bebop, just because of the evenness of the notes. Because if you listen to a lot of a band like say Tower of Power, and you've been listening to a lot of like or Earth, Wind and Fire, you hear a lot of stuff that's and you listen to somebody who goes basically just flipped around the snare and the surdo and the delivery of the division and the delivery of the 16th notes or 8th notes, depending how you want to count it, that's the important thing, the evenness. So that I have students that have to practice a lot playing straight notes because they're not used, because 99% of what they do is the beautiful unevenness of swing, which is a great thing to have, but you have to know when to turn that off as well, because some people cannot turn it off because they learn all these licks in which the notes are already all connected in that way. And for me, it was just the problem opposite. For me to learn how to play swing, I had to go through a lot of like conscious training, because what I was playing is like I'm playing like triplets all the time. It was horrible. It was like I couldn't stop it. It was a real issue. I have to go through that, and it's like what that means is that it doesn't matter which side you are, you have to cross to the other side and shake hands with the people in the middle somewhere there, and be able to understand the differences, then and be conscious about what it is. So I like to talk about some other groups. So otherwise, it'd be all time to talk about Samba. But what I just said, the four groups that I want to talk about today, the evenness really applies to all four of them. The evenness of notes, the being able to deliver the notes in an even way. And that was put to me when I was working with our master Pasquale. He basically said this: well, imagine that you're like laying a wall with bricks, and all the bricks are the same size, and the space between the bricks is also the same size. Now, once you learn how to do that, you can make the wall be curved or any shape you want, but you need to be able to create an evenness of notes. It's something that you have, sometimes if your practice comes from the unevenness of swing, which is beautiful and has its own incredible uses, and is very difficult to achieve, you might have to work hard at developing an evenness, which is so necessary for the kind of music that we're playing. So I will talk a little bit. Any questions about that before I move on?
Can you talk a little bit about the two-phrase rhythm that the drums and bass keep playing all the time? You feel the rhythm right there all the time. And I think many times when there is a rhythm session, sometimes maybe the piano player, okay, this play a Brazilian tune, and he plays pa 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 pa, but maybe the feel of the tune is pa 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 pa.
Oh yeah, okay. I think I know what you mean by your question. Well, many times what happens is that specifically what you address about pianists is that we all know that in jazz it's not cool to hit chords on the downbeat. You just play. Not very hip. So people should do. A lot of jazz tunes, the harmony is displaced, the accents of the harmony are displaced to a later point in time. In a lot of Brazilian music, and because we're dealing about the syncopations, it's also not very cool to play. Obviously. But on the other hand, if all you play is like this, it's also equally not cool. So what we do is actually that's one of the main characteristics from the accompaniment side, whether from guitar or piano or accordion or vibraphone, whatever it is that you're playing that can play chords, is actually we anticipate chords. And sometimes the bass doesn't have to. The bass can just stay because the bass has that function of hitting the downbeat, so the bass could anticipate or not. But for the piano, if you hear me comping, say the girl from Ipanema, I would do like this. And the melody, of course, if you hear the tune in English, it's very different than in Portuguese, because in English it's like this: tall, tan, young, lovely little girl. And in Portuguese, like, olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de graça, ela menina que vem, que passa, com doce balanço, o caminho do mar. Exactly what I was talking about. So many times, how you can tell where a player is from the accompaniment side is the ability to anticipate. And that's something else that I find a lot of jazz players are not very used to anticipate the harmony. They're great at playing the harmony a little bit later, because it's not cool to play it on downbeat. But the ability to anticipate the harmony is great. And drummers do that too, because they can go and they prepare a fill that kind of like ballistically. You watch where it's going to land. It's going to land on so you don't hear that kind of thing. But sometimes on the 8th note, sometimes on the 16th note, and it's not even a problem if we do not all hit the same place. And because that kind of syncopation engenders aftershocks. There's a thing that you go do. So there's things sometimes, a drummer could do an anticipated hit, and the bass could go afterwards and go. So that kind of conversation and interaction within the context of a rhythm section is what makes this music very interesting. The goal here is not to hit everything together, but to be talking the same language. And the same language is the language of the 16th subdivision and everything else. So I'm going to change grooves, and talk a little bit about the northeastern Brazilian groups and the Baião groups, which have been more and more popular. I was just talking to Mark and also to Tony a little earlier about how the Baião is such a great thing, but the Baião and the Forró and all those groups that come basically from northeastern Brazil, for a long time they suffered huge amount of discrimination, because the people who play this music were people who were illiterate, people with very poor, very humble origins that came, and they would come to a sophisticated place like Rio, São Paulo. People say, "Well, this is not the music." Even the Bossa Nova people were like, "No, this is weird. What kind of guy's playing the melody?" This strange, angular, very weird, different modes. It didn't really work on the same kind of thing. But in a way, this beauty of the music, first of all, it's really where you see in the soil of Brazil the flourishing of groups, of modes, of harmonic patterns that actually were originally created in the eastern, like the Middle East, from Pakistan, from the north of Africa, from Morocco, from Algeria, Egypt. And how, of course, if you know a little bit of history, I don't want to go too deep in history, but you know that the Arabs were dominating the Iberian Peninsula for 750 years. And that occupation ended in the 1400s, immediately before the Portuguese and the Spanish started to spread out through the world as navigators and to spread their influence. So whether you want it or not, that influence is very powerful there. You hear it in flamenco music in Spain. You hear it, of course, in this music that came with the Portuguese, but it was actually music of the Arab origin. So that's why we hear music like we hear Gnawa music from Morocco, we hear Qawwali music from Pakistan, and we hear so much. I was in India playing with my friend Chitravina Ravikiran, and the moment that I would go play like this. And let's do that. There's the tune called. Is that the one, Feira Livre? Is there? It's like a Baião blues. Yeah, that one. So let's go a little slower, because you can see a little bit what this is. And I made this in blues form, so this is interesting. I'll just start with the groove. Something about the skeleton of the group. Yeah, it's a baião, but I want the X-ray of it.
You don't have the accent of two or two.
Yeah, the bottom is different. Now we have actually a bass figure, or a left-hand figure, or a bass drum figure that is syncopated, that's moved off the beat. Remember, the other one we had the essence, the skeleton of the bottom being non-syncopated versus the right hand that was syncopated. Now, playing very slow, we can have this. Like a 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3. The groove has a syncopation on the bottom, and that means that the patterns that both that Mark is doing and then his other hand that I'm doing here are complementing that, as in. There's a variation instead of being 3-3-2 is 3-3-2-3, which of these? Sometimes, of course, I'm not saying that you can flip back and forth, but sometimes, you know, it's very easy to flip back and forth. This is just listening. So sometimes instead of playing the bass doing. Right. See that? Little subtle. 1/16th earlier. So there's no variations. There's cases in which the bass player is actually not syncopated at all, or the bass player is like doing. note a wide variety of rhythms in which you can set, forró, baião, arrastapé, shot, chachado. I mean, the shot being swung, of course, chachado and coco. And these are all, I'm not saying they're all the same, but a lot of times the difference between them is a lot more. For instance, what kind of lyrics are there? What kind of harmonic basic pattern there is? What kind of harmonic, for instance, many times the forró, I mean, the one we played before, it's kind of like a forró because it's based on a minor key. I mean, this kind of Dorian. See, many times a lot of tunes which are basically either minor or stuff like this, or stuff that goes. Now you hear this music which does not approach the tonic from the seventh, or the major seventh or dominant seventh. The music approaches the tonic from the sixth. Listen to this. So that is a great characteristic. A lot of the Baião melodies, they don't go, you'll be. Or even worse. You don't hear this. That's a very great characteristic of Baião styles, and of using sometimes the sixth in the approach to the tonic. And that comes from all the Eastern modes, the Middle Eastern modes that are used in a lot of this music, that sometimes the modes qualify that. And that's why you see the seed of the Middle Eastern influence in the Iberian Peninsula. And I like to think that it's kind of like a plant, that you bring the seed of a plant, and it would not grow anywhere else. But when you put it in an environment kind of like similar to where it came from, and a lot of the Middle Eastern music, when it came from desert, the very desertic regions, either from North Africa or so, when they reach the northeastern part of Brazil, which is also very dry, very arid, place with a lot of drought, these groups seem to do well in a very dry climate. And there you go, and you have all this music, and interesting how, you see the guys singing, and I've heard, like, the cantadores, the repentistas, the people who improvise, there's a huge tradition of people who improvise. They make their living by going from street market to, every city has a market on a different day of the week. So these guys go from city to city in their markets, and many of them are blind, or otherwise they might have some kind of physical disability. And they bring their 10-string violas, which are very archaic medieval instruments, like 10-string, 5 double strings, tuned in very strange tunings. That sometimes they open major triads, but sometimes it's very weird tunings. And the guys are playing these guitars and singing these verses, which have very highly structured with a certain number of syllables, which comes all the way back from medieval times. And it's very interesting to see that happen in the interior of Brazil. And I've done some of that in my music, which I've been inspired by these things. And if you, my first record, I have a tune that goes like. I actually wrote this melody based on a poem. You don't hear the lyrics, but the poem, the way the syllables are spread out in groups of 5 notes, and and that sometimes the guys keep adding syllables, and then they're coming to the end. It goes, and that's the end. And many times they hold the note. And you hear this kind of. So this kind of modal approach to the melody, you don't find this in Bossa Nova. No. Not at least until the guys who used to be Bossa Nova composers like Pedro Lobo or Carlos Lira kind of like started to drink from the source too, and started to think that it was very hip. Even Jobim, if you listen to later music of Jobim, you hear this kind of stuff there. Jobim has a tune called Pato Preto. That's exactly this. That's a Jobim melody because it totally got inspired. Also, Stoneflower too, which is another stone that the Jobim used of thing. So you see how that started to influence. And my musical mentor, Hermeto Pascoal, he brought that very clearly when he came from the Northeast to São Paulo, and he was involved in a seminal group called the Quarteto Novo, which I totally, which was Ayrton Moreira on drums, Hermeto Pascoal on piano and flute, Heraldo do Monte, fantastic guitarist, and Theo de Barros playing bass and guitar as well. And these people, their premise is, we're not going to do anything that's like jazz-based or jazz-oriented. All our music has to be totally taken from the interior of Brazil. And it was so different than everything else that immediately they stood out as being one of the best new groups, and they influenced everybody. And people like Edu Lupo, of course, were asking this group to play with them. And the Quarteto Novo, you can hear, they only made one record in 1967. That was it. But the influence they left is still, to this day, very lasting. And then, of course, we talk about Luiz Gonzaga, Jackson do Pandeiro, who are, very influential figures in bringing that music from its ghetto or segregation, either from immigrants from the Northeast or way back in the Northeast. And now, you go to any city, Rio, São Paulo, there's forró happening every night. There's a big fair in Rio that you go, it starts on Friday, goes until Sunday afternoon, non-stop. You can go dancing all day long, Saturday, through the night and into Sunday. And, fala, Jamie! So this is the kind of thing that is really important, and then, to be able to understand some of this, hopefully what I do today is just like, spice your curiosity so you can go and find out more about it. Yes?
The style you're talking about should be then distinguished from Afro Samba. We're talking about the same period of time, aren't we?
Oh, the Afro, what we know as Afro Samba as well, there's two different terms in there. One of them is the Afro Sambas of Baião and Middle Moraes, in which they really kind of went back to the roots, and the story goes that the two of them locked themselves in a house up in the mountains with a few cases of Scotch whiskey, and emerged 3 days later with all the Afro Sambas fully composed, and which all chants to all the Ossanha, to all the Orishas from Africa. However, if you really look at the origins of the rural origins of Samba, that's the real Afro Samba, which was known as Samba de Roda, which is like, the Samba de Roda is a circle, and the Samba that was played in a circle in the courtyards by the slaves. So that kind of thing, there's a very Afro, because it's like very chanting, and a lot of call and response, and very simple harmonies, but the melodies that you still hear a bit the same kind of melodies in the Partido Alto. And that one person sings, and there's a refrain which is answered by the group, and a lot of accompaniment with drums, the log drums or atabaques, which are kind of like conical congas, kind of like, and forks playing all over, forks in the melody, forks and the big sense of call and response. So those are very Afro Sambas. But then there's the sophisticated Afro Sambas like berimbau, canto de Ossanha, canto de Iemanjá, all the beautiful ones that there's a whole list of them, the ones that Baião and Vinicius wrote, which are just gorgeous pieces of music. Anyway, any other questions here? So it's different than the Afro Sambas. Yes. Yes.
Did you see that group that used a lot of the Renaissance and interior Brazilian stuff that came from modal music and the Renaissance stuff was Quarteto Novo?
Oh, Quarteto Novo, yeah. Quarteto Novo, they actually formed in São Paulo with two musicians from the Northeast, Hermeto and Heraldo, Theo de Barros from São Paulo, and Ayrton from the south of Brazil. They got together to play this music, and it's really the source of everything else. Hermeto was already doing his work there pretty much. He was very much the musical leader of this group, and all of them, Heraldo do Monte today, still makes incredible records, all based on music from the Northeast, and Ayrton too brought that influence very strongly.
Where can I get that record?
Google it up. You can find it. It's up there somewhere. EMI has put it out recently on CD, so you do find it. Yeah.
Well, it's absolutely fantastic what you're saying, because we were talking before about making the connection between Indian music, modal music, and North.
Oh yeah.
The whole diaspora through the New World. I've only seen one other that Cuban musicologist who came here a few years ago. Remember the one who didn't play? I think he brought it. That guy can talk about it. Very few people make that connection. It's beautiful that you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it is totally there to the sense that when I was in India and I would play Baião and forró, I remember the guys when he says, you can be here, you can do only that in a concert, and people just love it. And they did really love it. And we did record Asa Branca, which is like a standard Baião, one of the most traditional tunes on the Baião repertoire, recorded with the Chitravina and the Brindanga, and it would actually come out very nice.
On my new CD, I'm calling it Progressive Jazz, Indian and Latin influences, and I'm making that connection there too.
It's more and more available as people start to think outside their little boxes and start to connect, and you see the music, you know, that's what Hermeto always said, the music is really universal. It's a planetary force, it's a universal force, and at the planetary level, it really works, you know. The grooves that bubble up in places, and it's really impressive how you can go to different, very, apparently culturally very different societies like Turkey, or Morocco, or Brazil, or the United States, and you can find grooves which in a way connect. And people say, well, but how is that? I mean, there's the population from East India and Brazil is minimal. And there's, how come this music, you know, how come it's so much I identify with it? Because there's a lot of stuff in between that. The bridges were made and they were all invisible.
What's that thing you were talking about with the, you know, 5 syllables, you know, the chant and...
Oh, yeah, these are just, you know, they have that in Cuban music too, where they have the people sing the decimas, which are 10-syllable verses, and they have 5-syllable verses, and they have some kind of verses that you sing, but improvise an entire verse and then improvise it backwards, and it makes sense both ways.
That thing you sang with a flamenco cadence, can you do that with a groove? Can you show how that works with a groove?
The thing with
The dun-dun, the flamenco cadence, they call that flamenco cadence. How that works with a groove. I'd like to hear how that connects with it.
oh, basically, you know, if you just do just basically an F7. Works in so many Baião tunes. A lot of them. Luis Gonzaga has like. So that kind of the modal stuff that you hear, and it's really bluesy also in the sense because it has dominant 7 chords going up a 4th. So yeah, there's a lot of beautiful harmonic ideas in the Baião, and that's why, you know, when a composer with a vision like Hermeto Pascoal's using the Baião, which for him is just where he comes from, and he made that so modern, that it's so modern that it's still not out there. It's still people are starting to discover that now. Yes?
This is kind of a question for Mark. Well, the triangle is very central to the rhythm Baião.
Yes.
I just wanted to see Mark demonstrate a little bit to me, and if any other drummers, and how he gets his ride hi-hat to sound like a triangle.
Okay. Well, the typical triangle pattern is 4 16th notes, and the middle 2 are open, so the first and last are muffled, so it sounds slowed down. It sounds like this. So I do it by opening and closing with the foot. Your traditional Baião group is a trio with a zabumba, which is a handheld drum, kind of like narrow drum, that you play with a beater in one hand and a little bamboo stick on the other, a triangle, and an accordion. So with these 3 instruments, you can have a dance for all night long. And it's really amazing, like, you know, the trio, the forró like this, you know, the guys who really play this well, that was actually Hermeto started working in this formation as a professional at the age of 14. And back in those days, every musician had to play all the 3 instruments. It just rotated. So it was him, his father, and his brother. So all 3 played the accordion, all 3 played the pandeiro, and then kids had pandeiro instead of singing, and triangle. And they just kept circling. Okay, now you take the accordion, I'll take the... So the 3 of them kept turning around, so they got to develop that really strong. The pandeiro is actually an instrument that's used in most... Pandeiros, of course, is the old aduf, Arabic drum, frame drum, that it became a very typical Brazilian instrument. You know, essential element in Samba, essential element in Baião, and everything else. So, about some of the marches, because the marches are really beautiful in Brazil. And that, again, is another very strong Portuguese influence. Especially, a lot of them came from the Portuguese processions, the Catholic and the religious processions that you had, for churches, for patron saints, for Christmas. And one of the most beautiful ones are actually known as the ranchos, ranchos as in ranch. And there's a variety called the marcha rancho. The marches have always been, as a matter of fact, when people think of carnival music, they always think of samba. Actually, the samba is a late addition to carnival. The carnival, for many years, in Rio, the carnival was only done with marches. And still to this day, we have what's known as marchinha. And okay, take a little look at the word marcha. Marcha comes from the march, but the word march comes from Mars, which is like, the Roman god of war, which is known as Ares in Greece. And so basically, when you had, with the Romans and the Greeks were the first people to actually assemble like large, thousands of soldiers in legions and battalions, and they needed a way for those people to move together, because otherwise it would be just everybody running and losing. So they started with the idea of getting drums and getting patterns that would actually make people tap their feet together, because that's something that people do by instinctively. You don't have, it's not a cultural thing, it's a biological thing. Whenever you hear certain kinds of grooves, you lock your feet into the downbeat. So then if you have like patterns which point to the downbeat, as in see a lot of pickups leading to downbeat, immediately you're going to have people walking to that pattern. And if you want them to walk fast, you go, remember, Ben Hur, the guy with the, faster, rolling the guys there, the guy, okay. It's same thing, you're getting people to march and move according to a certain pattern. And in the case of the march, the march has always been used, of course, in military contexts in which you need people to march. However, the religious marches were a lot sweeter than that. The marcha rancho is a beautiful style from Brazil, which is usually in minor keys for some reason. And some of the they're basically, the march is a little syncopated. So you want to do that one that will have the rancho encantado. Just we're playing the Kill Two Birds with One Stone and rehearse it. So let's just start with E minor, just the groove of E minor for a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Syncopation right here. they parade and they compete to see, who gets more votes, and so every year there's often associated with Christmas pageants, which are people, as being part of the whole Christmas thing where they have the girls dress up with the sheet, they bring. So anyway, that's a beautiful. The march evolved a lot of other things too in Recife, Pernambuco, northeastern part of Brazil, starting in the very, beginning of the 20th century and moving on, especially as we move towards World War II. In the United States, there's a very strong presence there because they had an Air Force base. It was the closest spot to fly to Africa from. And so that meant there was a lot of ships coming in with the whole big band thing and big sounds of brass. And the whole frevo music, which became carnival music in Recife, it was really developed as being very fast marches. And with high syncopation. And lots of incredible amount of syncopation and brass music with trombones, trumpets, saxophones. But this is marching music, so a lot of people, some of the best horn players from Brazil come from that region, from Recife, Olinda, because they have to practice playing breakneck speeds, syncopated phrases, marching in a 120-degree sun, up the hill, down the hill, up the hill, and the whole rhythm section is like the bass drum and the handheld cymbals. A lot of what we know today as being kind of like the disco sound of the hi-hat actually comes from the frevo, because the frevo is being a very fast march. We can do, for instance, G minor, C7, F, and then D7. As interlocking horn lines with like trombones and saxophones, trumpets, screaming. These guys, there's a new orchestra called Spock Frevo Orchestra from Recife. These guys are just unbelievable. I mean, it's really like the big band language expounded to this kind of groove, and it's amazing. And Hermeto, of course, has written beautiful frevos, and it's a great style. In Recife, that's all they dance. There's no samba in Recife. The frevo and marcha ranchos, they do some of the ranchos too, like the slower ones. So you see, the skeleton is the same. The style is completely different. But one of them is really sweet and lyrical and kind of like slow march. The other one is like, dance as if your neck will break. And actually, some of the dance acrobatics of frevo are actually borrowed, or I don't know if they're borrowed, but they're very similar to a lot of the Russian style dancing where the guys kind of like this, but without the seat, And they do it with umbrellas, because it often rains in the carnival there. And these guys are incredible players, jumping up and down. It's really beautiful to see what a cultural treasure from Brazil. And musically, it's a style that it's still. And there's of course the machinhas from Rio, which are totally different. Not as fast as this one, but there's a lot of marches in the music of Rio. And it's actually an ironical thing that the samba that became so strong, and now because in the samba parades in Rio, they have more and more people parading, often 5,000, 6,000 people have to parade within a certain amount of time. So if they go a minute beyond their allotted time, they start losing points. And that's a very big thing. Lives are depending on that. So they have to make the tempos faster and faster. So a lot of the samba school parades in Rio are now starting to sound like frevos, because the guys are playing, at that kind of tempo, you cannot do any more like tack, 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 tack. If you listen to the old timers, the people who used to parade in the sambas, they used to parade with sambas like that. And now it's like, na 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 cultural change right there. And just before we stop, I'd like to briefly mention that another great group, really incredible group, that's known as the Maracatu. And again, the Maracatu is a spiritual, and it's a very solemn ceremony of crowning for an African king and queen. Transplanted to Brazil, and in Brazil it became like a carnival, actually disguised under the disguise of a carnival parade, but it's actually it's a very spiritualizing, very beautifully deep. We can look at the canja, you know this one called canja na cavaca? That's I don't know if I sent you this one. It's like it's so easy you're gonna learn, it's just 2 chords. Okay. It's like these. Yeah. So it's the B part, the bridge is actually a baião, but the A section is like just a groove. So the maracatu, in a nutshell, has a very strong accent on 1. It's very different than the other ones because a lot of this, the marches being accent on 2, the samba being accent on 2. Maracatu being into 4, the accent is on 1, but everything else is syncopated. So traditionally the maracatu is done with a group of about 6 or 7 rope-strung drums known as alfaias, which are played with two beaters, 2 wooden beaters, and the guys hold the beaters in their hands, and they're basically doing forks. They're doing in different, some bigger, some smaller drums, plus a snare drum that buzzes again the fork, and a bell, sometimes a double count bell that you go like. Sometimes on 1 large bell known as the gongue, which they just play by muting. But basically the patterns are syncopated and non-syncopated, like down, 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 up, 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 so when you put it all together, it's a really fantastic groove, and on that groove usually have people singing most of the melodies of maracatu are just arpeggios of major triads, and that's why I'm going to play one of mine here, and but first some of the traditional ones like. Which are sung and by one guy and repeated by a female chorus over and over again these are beautiful melodies. Some of them are really strong. So I'll play one of mine here. This one's called Canja na Cavaca, and it has basically just 2 dominant 7 chords, and the groove is kind of like. Syncopation at the level of accompaniment, and the groove that Mark is playing, that is really it. So a lot of these grooves are based on that, and traditionally the maracatu doesn't have even this degree of like harmonic complexity, which have this dominant 7 chords kind of like moving around. But as I said before, what I hope I can really do here is really to spike your curiosity to the sense that you can go to my website. For instance, there I have a lot of resources there. My website is jovisan.net, www.jovisan.net. It's like my name, Jovino Santos Neto. on dance. And if you go on the music page, and there's like an educational links page in which I have a paper which is basically based on this clinic called Ginga. And if you just look there on the list, you can download the whole PDF. It's like, I don't know, 12 pages or so. It's all free downloads. There's one also about the history of Brazilian piano and many other interesting links to Brazilian music. There are good websites in which you can actually listen to a lot of music and read more about. So again, there's always more time than we think we have is what we need. But hopefully, I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have. And yeah, we're playing tonight at Ryle, so come and see us. Yeah, hopefully it'll be a fun gig. And check my website also for more stuff. There's lots of and then books, Hermeto Pascoal song books and Brazilian music books, a lot of these things in scores. So it's all there. So if any more questions, I'll be happy to answer. Yes, please.
Can we play this on Festa de...
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, this is a samba in 3. It's basically based on the old samba de rodas, and that's actually, many people are not familiar with sambas in different groups, and this is a 3/4 group. We're gonna play that. Let's play the head out, okay? Like the entire from the top, and then to the end. Okay? From the intro, and then we play it out. Okay? 1, 2, 3. So, I mean, we're not really even scratching the surface here. Yeah, the Ijexá is actually a rhythm from West Africa. You know, it's the same kind of rhythms that you find in a lot of the Ifa religious traditions. And basically, what it does is that it's so it's usually done with the atabaques, and a bell pattern it's almost inverted in relationship to the maracatu. So you have bell patterns that goes like. Where's the maracatu be? This one is like. And by Javan, by the tunes that have, that's basically the Ijexá group. And there's some beautiful ones too. I recently did an arrangement for a tune by Jerônimo called Edio Shun, that's totally based. And I recorded in Bahia with some guys who play this, the real Ijexá, like the guys with this huge cachixis. Beautiful sound. Yeah, Mark?
That sounds a little bit like the Nyambingue Jamaican thing, what you just did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between what people did. That's also the, remember, Bahia is also the land of the samba reggae, where they have also a lot of that.
Could you demonstrate that? Could you demonstrate a samba reggae?
Well, basically, it's a whole drum-based thing in which they slur the 16ths, and that's so you have this. So the groove has a lot to do with these big pickups, a lot of drums, and it's a real beautiful variation that's actually taken. There's the people from groups like Ileaye. These guys, their breaks are so evolved and complex. I have a few friends who play with Ileaye, and it's unbelievable the level of complexity of their rhythmic breaks. I mean, it's kind of like the Indian breaks, you know. And I learned some of those, and it's just like scary. And there's no way you cannot write it. There's no counting. You know, can you count? They don't count anything. They go like, oh my God! So there's only one way. Just learn by making mistakes. That's the only way. Yeah, but it's beautiful. It's very nice. They do a great job with that, especially this group, Ileaye. They're amazing. Anyway,